In this critter box are eggs, and no, not chicken eggs. These eggs are random reptile eggs that over the next 60 days I'll be trying to hatch them. I have no idea what's inside. A couple of days ago I got a message asking if I wanted some eggs. Fried eggs? Fried eggs are good. I thought he was honestly joking around, and then he types back eggs. So I take him up on the offer on some eggs. So the goal is to try and hatch and raise whatever comes out of these eggs and build a home for them. Little did I know, I was in for a ride.
Wait. Oh no. What is that? No.
On day one, I wanted to even check if the eggs were fertile, or check how close they were to hatching. So the best way to do that is to use a phone torch technique. Basically using the torch from the phone to shine through the egg and check for any life. When you're doing this with the eggs, you have to be super careful not to damage them or drop the eggs while doing this. When shining the torch through the egg, you can see there's definitely something in there, but I can't tell what. I can see shapes and bright redness, which basically means there is something in there for sure, and it's 100% fertile. So I checked the egg that was on its own, and this one was a lot different. Shining the torch through, you can see there is a body or a tail pretty much ready to hatch at that point. It wasn't red, it was the colour of whatever is inside this egg. Let's go through the different reptiles that actually could be inside this egg. The first option is the common garden skink. Their eggs look almost identical to the ones that we have, but so do the other three options I'm about to show you. The second option is a chameleon egg. This one I'm not too sure about, but there's definitely a chance. The third option is a dune gecko egg or a sand gecko egg. But the fourth option and the most likely option is a morning gecko, which wouldn't be ideal as these geckos can get out of control fast. I'll explain later, but for now let's check up on the eggs. Around 4 days later I went to check on the eggs, picked them up to see if they were still doing good, and it was here that I noticed something wrong with one of the eggs. It looked like something tried to push its way out and it was sort of struggling. Either way, the egg didn't look great. So I got my girlfriend to help me out and inspect closer, and when getting a closer look, it moved. Whatever is inside this egg is alive and is struggling to get out itself. So the plan was to try slowly and carefully get the gecko out of its shell without hurting it. This was super tricky, as you can see, but eventually it managed to get out, and our first look at whatever was inside this egg is born. And yes, you guessed it, that's a morning gecko. But why is having a morning gecko a problem? Well, let me explain. Morning geckos are parthenogenetic, and yes, I do struggle to say that, but it basically means it's an all-female species that reproduce without males. That means these geckos stimulate eggs just by being near other morning geckos, or sometimes completely by themselves, and pop out clones of themselves over and over, pretty much until the end of time. But it was time to check up on the newly hatched morning gecko and see how the little guy is doing. Looking at the gecko, he doesn't seem great overall. I just put him in this little box to keep an eye on him until I feel like he was ready to go into the main tank. I ended up putting some Pangea food in the box as well, so hopefully he could rehydrate himself. I also just moved him a little just to see how he reacts to me, and as I was checking up on him, his 5-star tank arrived. Not really sure why this says live insects, as it's just a bunch of glass, but after taking all the packaging off and unboxing it properly, we can finally see what we're working with. I went for a smaller terrarium for now, as it will be a while until the gecko gets bigger and would need an upgrade. For now, this is the perfect size. You can see that the terrarium has a small opening on the top to drop in any crickets or flies without disturbing the gecko. It also has a mesh top, and no, the gecko can't fit through it, luckily. But as I was doing the tank, I noticed something moving in the box that the gecko hatched from. Was it more geckos, or did something get into the box? More on that later, but for now, let's finish off the terrarium. For the bottom of the tank, you should always do a drainage layer. The drainage layer lets water go from the soil into this layer and stop the plants inside the vivarium from getting root rot and flooding the tank with water. For this, we use leca balls. They're very lightweight and do the job perfectly. Next, it was time to add the substrate barrier. This creates a barrier between the soil and the drainage layer and only lets water and sometimes roots pass through it. After adding the substrate barrier, it was time to add the substrate. I'm not adding a lot of substrate as the gecko doesn't really use it, it's more for the plants and also to keep humidity up. But quickly, let's check up on whatever was moving inside that box. And well, yeah, that's another morning gecko that just hatched and has some stuck shed on it. Now, this one is already bigger and more active than the first one that hatched, which honestly isn't the best sign for the first gecko that hatched. So I wanted to make sure that the newly hatched gecko was completely fine and made sure that he didn't have any stuck eggshells on him and just see his overall condition. You can see that this gecko was already super active and was already shedding. Our first gecko wasn't active at all and didn't shed at all, which makes me believe the gecko hatched too soon or there's other problems. But the plan with this gecko was to make it feel more at home. So I added some fresh food, some leaf litter to hide around and under, and some moss to keep the humidity out. I'm only going to keep him here for a day or two. But for now, let's get back to the build. I wanted to add a plant so the gecko could hide in it and feel more safe, and also giving the gecko something to climb around. The plant is just a simple fern which should do the job perfectly. Next, I wanted to add a bit of cork to give the gecko another climbing opportunity and have different textures in the tank. Remember, this tank is only temporary while it gets a little bit bigger. I then gave the tank a little spray down for the gecko to drink and also bring up the humidity to help with shedding. Also added a little bit of food as well. With the top of the tank, I didn't want any flies getting out or maybe even the gecko getting out, so I just taped it just in case. After all that, it was time to add the gecko. You can see he's looking a lot cleaner and overall better than when we first hatched. Then I added him into his new home. Instantly he went to the farm and started climbing and exploring. After a day or two, I wanted to check on the other gecko that just hatched to make sure he ate some food and finished shedding. I put the tub into another tank so if the gecko got out of the tub, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. You can see as soon as I opened the tub, the gecko was wanting to explore straight away. The gecko looked good and healthy. Around 2 weeks later, I upgraded the tank little by little. I gave them a feeding ledge so the food was off of the ground, some sticks, leaf litter, and a new fake plant. As you can see, they love hiding in the new plant I gave them. Eventually, I'll upgrade them to a proper full tank, but for now, this tank is perfect for them at this size. The geckos are doing amazing and they became super healthy and growing a lot of confidence. I mean, look at this little guy, he's just chilling on my finger. You can really see how different each gecko is. This one is so bright compared to the other one, and they've also gotten pretty fat as you can see. I tried my best to get on video them eating flies. You can barely see it, but they're hunting super well. I've seen no problems at all with the geckos, and hopefully it stays that way. It really is amazing how confident these geckos are considering how small they are. They don't mind me picking them up at all, and when I feed them flies, they don't run away either. So that's the journey over. I've learned a lot from this video and I hope you have too. From looking through eggs to hatching and then building their tank, it's been an amazing experience. Let me know what you'd like me to try raise next, and for now, I'll continue to raise them and they'll continue to pump out eggs to the point I'll have an army of lesbian geckos.